Our next speaker this afternoon is Chief Art Acevedo, who was sworn in as Chief of the Houston Police Department on November 30th, 2016. He now leads a department of 5,200 sworn law enforcement officers and 1,200 civilian support personnel. He began his law enforcement career in 1986 as a field patrol officer in East Los Angeles with the California Highway Patrol. He rose through the ranks and was named Chief of the California Highway Patrol in 2005. Most recently, before Houston, he served as 9 years as Chief of the Austin Police Department. We are especially grateful to have the Chief here today when he has an extremely heavy schedule today with the President's visit. Please join us in welcoming Chief Art Acevedo. Thank you.
Well, hi everybody. Good afternoon. It's a nice, quiet day here in Houston. It's I feel pretty safe. You know, I feel like I'm out of order, in order. So many, Your Honor, so many justices. How many judges are in here? Oh Lord. Well, if I say something you don't like, just remember my name is Ed Gonzalez. I'm the sheriff here in Harris County, and thank God we all look alike. But it's really an honor and a privilege to be here with you. And I just got to tell you, as a Texan that's been around since 2007, I love it here. But it's really interesting that I don't think people realize just how progressive we are in terms of as a state. Where a lot of times I think conservative values, people don't realize that doesn't mean that we cannot be progressive as it relates to criminal justice reform. And I'm really proud of the fact that as I look out in this audience, I see a lot of the judges that are really committed to not being tough on crime, not being smart on weak on crime, but being smart on crime. You know, figuring out how do we. Ultimately, we're all going to be judged. I kind of told this to the Attorney General the other day, Jeff Sessions, when he was in town last month. I said, Judge, he was a judge at some point, right? Jeff Sessions. And I said, General, I said, you know, we're always going to, ultimately we're going to be judged as a criminal justice system, as whether it's the administration in Washington or the governor's office or the mayor here or the police chief or the judge. We're going to be judged on how safe the community is. And safety is not about broad brushes. Safety is about being thoughtful. And I just want to tell everybody here that's part of this criminal justice system, thank you for being pragmatic and for being smart and for looking for evidence-based approaches. And today we're really talking about mental health. And if you think about what's going on with mental health in our country, sadly, it's our jails, our prisons, our juvenile hall facilities, where a lot of our failures to deal with mental health issues ends up being handled by us in criminal justice. And one of the things that I'm proud of here in Houston is that, you know, we're working very closely with the DA's office, with Kim Ogg, the Sheriff's Department, and Sheriff Gonzalez, because we realize that you can be smart or you can be tough. And I think you can be smart and tough. And so what we're doing in Houston is doing more and more to identify people whose behavior is really being driven by illness, by mental illness, and try to treat them a little differently, especially when you're thinking about lower level crimes, when you're thinking about crimes that if we were to be smart about it and divert these folks and put them into programs to deal with the underlying cause of the behavior, right, which is the mental illness, we may be able to actually intervene in somebody's life and get them on a path to health before those low level offenses turn into serious and violent offenses. And I'll give you an example. I mean, we had one guy that we looked at. We arrested him 50 times in 1 year for criminal trespassing. And let's face it, with the bail bond issue in terms of around the country, where more and more courts are saying you can't hold people behind bars just because they can't post bail for low-level offenses. Even if we were to book them, they're going to get out within a matter of hours on a PR bond, more than likely. And so, and if you think about the victim in this case, which is the homeowner, the business owner that is tired of the same person, they don't want people hammered. What they want is a change of behavior. We are now in this county, in this city, we're actually identifying those people and we're actually diverting them from the word go. Judge Emmett, who's one of my favorite county officials in the state, just opened the Judge Emmett, what are we calling it, anybody? The Judge Emmett Mental Health Diversion Center just opened. We just had a hard opening, a soft opening, now how the hard opening. Well, we're actually diverting people for these low-level offenses to that center. And the hope is, even if we could just get 2%, 5%, just 10% on the track to wellness, we're going to get so much more bang for our buck. And then on top of that, you think about the Houston Police Department, a department in 2018. In 2018, we have 300 fewer officers than we did 20 years ago, but 500,000 more people. A department that's serving a city of 640 square miles with only 5,200 cops. Contrast that with the city of Chicago with close to 13,000 cops for 248 square miles. And at the same time, 500,000 growth, we also cut our support staff by 43%. We have to be efficient in the way that we fight crime. And so we are going to continue to be committed to diverting people into where they really need. And which is what? Treatment. What they really need is to get on medication. What they really need is to get on a path to wellness, because putting them in jail is certainly not the answer, especially when there's no space as we speak for the hardcore 20,000 violent gang members that outnumber us 4-1. That's 20,000 documented gang members. Prisons and jails belong. The people that belong there are people that we should be afraid of because they're going to hurt us, and not that we're mad at because they're aggressively panhandling or they're defecating in our sidewalk, or they're doing things that really anger us from a quality of life standpoint, but in reality they pose no threat. Prison and jail space should be really saved for people that pose a threat of serious bodily injury or bodily injuries. Am I making sense to you also? I know I'm kind of preaching to the choir, but it's not just enough, from my perspective, to divert people, because we know that a lot of the controversial uses of force involving law enforcement in this country, a lot of the so-called, and a lot of advocates don't like the suicide by cop type calls, a lot of those calls could be, and those incidents that create so much tension and it really tears down public trust between law enforcement and the community that we serve, could be avoided if we divert the call for service on the front end. Divert it from law enforcement and divert it towards mental health professionals and NGOs that are better prepared, better trained, right, to actually deal with the person in mental distress. And I'm proud of the fact that we have in the Houston Police Department a partnership with the county where we're actually funding a program when that 911 call comes in and our people are trained, that if it's a call, unless it absolutely requires a police response because somebody's in imminent danger of serious bodily injury, law enforcement isn't responding. We're responding other partners. Or we have mental health professionals riding with us, so when we do make the decision to respond, that mental health professional is taking lead while the officer's standing back, which, by the way, when somebody's got a mental crisis, uniforms and authority and guns and batons, do they escalate that person's emergency or mental health crisis, or does it calm them down? Whereas if we had somebody that's a counselor or a mental health professional that knows and is trained and, more importantly, is dressed in a manner that is disarming, that actually helps that person remain calm, we are, I believe, from a strategic standpoint, we're actually better prepared to end that call without the tragic results. And that's what we're doing here in the city of Houston. It makes me proud that we have a county and a city that are working together hand in hand to not try to come up with political slogans, right? Tough on crime, we throw away the key, but are actually trying to have an impact on the safety of our community. And I'm proud to say that despite the fact that we are absolutely an under-resourced police department, I've been here now, it'll be 2 years, November 30th. It feels like dog years, I'll be honest with you. I mean, hey, Harvey, Super Bowl, I can go on and on, as mean a budget crisis, right, and everything else that's going on around here. But despite all the challenges, because we are trying to be smart on crime, we are trying to be smart in the way that we respond to these calls, and quite frankly, a disproportionate number of calls and crimes involving us involve two things, disproportionately: mental illness and substance abuse, alcohol and drugs. Mental illness and substance abuse. And we don't know what came first because they do intersect, right? What came first, the substance abuse, the substance problem, or the mental illness? It doesn't really matter which one it is. The bottom line is, if you look at what drives a lot of violent crime and the cost associated, both the economic cost, the emotional cost, the societal cost, those are the two of the greatest drivers. Does anybody dispute that assertion, yes or no? There's no disputing it. And so if we know that that's the driver, if we know that that's what's really driving the behavior, when we have an opportunity, especially at the lower level offenses, where it's a lot, I mean, if you shoot somebody, I don't care what it's about, you're gonna go to prison, right? I mean, do not confuse my kindness with weakness, okay? All right, just be real clear on that. If you hurt somebody, and then, yeah, we'll give you some treatment. We'll be in state prison somewhere. But if we are smart at the lower level offenses, even somebody that has an extensive criminal history of violent crime, why wouldn't we want to divert them and get them into the treatment place and get them to the Ed Emmett diversion facility? Because again, if we just were able to impact just 10% of those folks, that's a huge victory. And I'm sorry, but I think it's a lot cheaper to actually treat people and treat the underlying cause of the violent crimes that we're dealing with and the property crimes that we're dealing with than incarcerate people, right? And the problem is that not enough communities are figuring that out, and not enough communities are making an investment in getting people out of those situations. And I'm going to bring up a perfect example, sobriety centers. I mean, Austin, Texas, 6th Street is like one big drunk fest, right? I was there for almost 10 years, and every Friday, Saturday, and Judge, you were with me out there. I mean, you got to wash your shoes when you're done if you walk in an alley because there's vomit everywhere. But yeah, who said yeah? You must be, are you like a Longhorn or what? Hook 'em? Yeah, okay, all right. I'm taking you to the sobriety center afterwards. I forgot I'm dealing with a bunch of lawyers. Happy hours for lawyers usually start about 2 o'clock. And, you know, it's, what? Well, you think only cop jokes are appropriate? What's wrong with you people? Huh? I mean, let's face it. Okay, I won't tell. I better not. There's judges in here. I don't want to be held in contempt of court. Love lawyers. Love lawyers. Lawyers are like cops. Everybody hates them until you need one, right? But the only difference between cops and lawyers is usually they'll still love us on most occasions, but when you get the bill, they'll hate you all over again, so don't get excited. It's very expensive. But I think it's time for our country, again, to move away from, and I'm proud to be in Texas, where we're moving away from a one-size-fits-all approach to criminal justice. And the one-size-that-fit-all approach to criminal justice historically in Texas has been lock them up and throw away the key. And I think that we need to hold elected officials responsible, not for the rhetoric. We need to hold them responsible for the results. And what I was starting to say here is that I'm proud of the fact that despite the fact that we are 300 cops fewer today than 20 years ago with 500,000 more people, all of our violent crime is down this year, again. All of it with the exception of murders that at one point was up. Thank you very much, thank you. Thanks, thank you very much. With the types of homicides, which, by the way, we're up 15%, but we now, as of this morning, have it down 6%, and it's still, we don't want to look year to year, we want to look at trends. We're still about 30, 40 homicides below the year before, was my first full year. And that's because we're being smart on crime. If I can avoid responding to that mental health call, I can keep that cop 10-8, which means in service, to go deal with other things, and most importantly, I can make sure that we handle that call in a manner that leads towards a good, positive resolution. Which brings me to young people. You know, Judge was just telling me that you just learned today that by 14 we know whether somebody's got, it's manifests itself in behavior, so on and so forth, and I know that when you think about schools and then you think about some of the crazy things kids do, there's two things I think we need to think about in terms of young people. And is there any school district policing, any school district people here? I really believe that it's not good for your mental health to actually be locked up as a young person. And I think that you never know. We're all like half a chemical away from being that person that goes from that one, and it can happen to any of us. Right now, there's a former Houston police officer that's homeless on these streets because he ended up finding himself with mental health, and sadly, somebody gave up. It was before I got here. Family probably gave up on him. Society gave up on him, and this person's out in the streets. But we have really in our country what we've done to young people. We've criminalized adolescence. Judges, we've criminalized adolescence. I am a Cuban-born person. You mentioned my mama to me, when I was a kid, you're going to get punched in the nose. And I can tell you that from experience because Richard Quintero, and I remember his name, I'm 54. Richard Quintero, my freshman year in high school in science class, mentioned my mama, and I punched him right in the nose. But you know what's sad? That punch didn't get me anything. The teacher, I waited till the teacher was out of the classroom. All right? And by the time he got back, we had already broken it up. And then we fought at lunch, by the way. You know how that goes. But here's the sad truth. I might not be, if that was today, I may not be here speaking to you all. Because today, that same punch doesn't get you to the counselor's office. That same punch in too many schools gets you a criminal summons, gets you arrested, gets you into the pipeline that we call the school to prison pipeline. And here's one of the unintended consequences that happened in our country when Joe Biden and Bill Clinton introduced the cops omnibus crime bill that introduced hundreds of thousands more cops. Y'all remember that? What happened since then? I know there's some data, but not much. Any academics? Anybody here with a doctor? Any doctors in here? PhDs? You need to study this. Because I will bet you a year's worth of salary that you will see what happened when we started introducing police forces. And right now, the answer to gun shootings isn't let's try to do something to keep guns in the right hands. Yeah, I'm that communist, left-wing nut that believes that guns belong in the hands of law-abiding Americans of sound mind. And no, I should not be able to go to the NRG gun show and sell my M&P 15 assault rifle to the highest bidder, and just because I'm a so-called private seller, okay? No, our answer is more cops, right? So if you think the dropout rate is bad now, look at the data. I promise you that what's happened to our country is as we introduce more and more cops into the learning environment, cops started taking the place of teachers, administrators, and counselors. And I guarantee you that there will be a direct correlate. Is that the air being let out of the room, or what did I do? Huh? Okay, who is that? You, out, all right? And take an Uber because I know what you drive. So anyway. So I promise you, if we looked at that data, because I know that, if you looked at that data, I promise you a year's worth of salary, right? How many of you are baby boomers? Was there a big problem with the dropout rate in our country when we were kids? That's a fairly new phenomenon, would you agree? I promise you there's a direct correlation between the introduction of police forces into school districts and the dropout rate. And then you add that mental illness piece, and we put a kid that's already on the verge, right? Because they already are having some emotional challenges. And hey, and growing up is not easy. It's tough being a kid. There's no more cruel, you want to find a cruel place, go into a second grade elementary school and listen to these kids, right? There's a direct correlation. I promise you I promise you that if anybody did a definitive study, they're going to find that dropout rate. And guess what that does? When you take somebody that's already on the edge or on the spectrum in terms of the mental illness, right, and wellness, whether it's emotional wellness, mental wellness, or any kind of wellness, you'll have a much better chance of achieving it if you're not behind bars in some juvenile hall. By the way, when we put somebody in juvenile hall, who are we putting them with? Good kids or bad kids? And so we've got to rethink that. Because the last thing you need, if you're a kid that is on the spectrum in terms of the mental health wellness, is to be the trauma of being put where? And by the way, if mental illness or challenge is what drove the behavior in the first place, and then on top of that, we're going to exacerbate it by criminalizing what should be adolescent behavior. How many of you got in fistfights when you were kids? It's part of growing up. And then you add the socioeconomics that I promise you that if you go to Westlake Hills High School and then you go to an inner city high school with in a poor community, do you think those kids are being treated the exact same way? You talk about this proportionality, they're being treated a lot differently, I promise you. And you can research that too. But that one, I'll just do a month's worth of salary. We've got to impact that as well, because it has an impact on overall crime, safety, and most importantly, I think the health of our nation. And let me just say one last thing about these issues that it's really important. You know, right now, I was just at the POTUS is coming this afternoon. Everybody's been lined up all night, and it's really funny. You know how I know I'm doing a pretty good job on public policy positions? Anybody want to know how I know? I don't need a survey. I don't need anything, because I get beat up by the extreme left just as much as I get beat up by the extreme right? Which tells me, hey man, I must be doing something right? Because if either extreme likes you, believe me, you're out of touch with the American pragmatic mindset that we've had for 240 years. I'm just going to throw this out because I do have an influential room in here. We are accepting things today as norms that for 240 years we would have never accepted. We're accepting things as norms, as behavior. We're justifying behavior at the highest levels. I'm talking about from Washington to state capitals, to county halls, to courtrooms, that for 240 years we would have said absolutely not. And if you're a person of faith, I'm going to tell you what I've been telling communities of faith. We can fool each other, we can fool our spouses, we can fool our neighbors, we can fool our pastors, but you can't fool God. And God's watching us as a nation. And God's not going to hold us accountable just for what we did, but he's also going to hold us accountable for what we didn't do, what we failed to do. So I'm telling you that because it ain't too late for us to speak out and get our nation back on track. We're off the rails right now. And you all know that because you're in the courtrooms. But if you're a person that has influence, please use that influence to have an impact and get us back on track. I don't know what's going on, but I am a person of faith, and I can tell you the devil's alive and well. I mean, just pay attention to what's going on in our country. Please use your influence to hold people accountable. And holding people accountable doesn't mean we have to be mean-spirited about it. It just means that you need to speak out. And speak up. And then I think sometimes I'm doing the right thing, because when I was over there with MAGA, people think I'm a big liberal, right? They have no idea anything about me, right? They think, oh, that's that big liberal. My cops think I'm, because my Second Amendment stance, which is we need to do a better job of keeping hands in the hands of law-abiding Americans with sound mind. And when a guy's beating on his wife, maybe we need to go get those guns and take him into custody so he doesn't turn around and shoot his wife the next time we get to that call. I mean, it's just something called common sense and good judgment. And we just use common sense and good judgment, whether it's the way we handle people in crisis, especially at the lower level, common sense and good judgment in terms of the way we develop policies. And we all have common sense and good judgment in our minds and in our hearts, we'll be in a much better place. So please know that if you're a person, and I'm talking to the judges that are elected and everybody else, if you never find yourself in controversy ever, then I always question, what does that person stand for? Because if you never find yourself in controversy, you know what that means? You ain't standing for much. All you're standing for is for the next election. All you're standing for is for job security. And the good Lord says in the Bible, he's the one that opens doors that no one else can open, and he'll close it when he's done. So you know what? If you're going to read the Bible, follow Scripture. Have no fear. Walk with the Lord. Realize that mental illness is addressed through treatment, not behind bars, and that we are called upon to be smart on crime, not tough on crime. And lastly, for the people that want to be too liberal, bleeding hearts, do not confuse my kindness with weakness. Because today, if anybody tries to step out there with this presidential visit, I don't care if it's to the left or to the right, the First Amendment is very clear what you can and can't do, and criminal activity will not be tolerated. I don't care what. Because at the end of the day, by the way, what do extreme left and extreme right have in common? They're both extreme. They're both extreme. It's almost like they're looking in the mirror, and they're extreme for different reasons, but they're both just that extreme. And extreme is wrong, whether it's left to the right, and I just hope that when it comes to this discussion here especially, that we find pragmatic. Well, and the last thing, education. And you've heard me talk about this, Judge. When people find themselves in tough situations and lack of opportunity, I think that it creates that fertile environment, right, for mental health challenges to maybe manifest themselves and be exacerbated. Because think about the anger. If I already have a mental illness and I'm suffering, where I'm on the verge, and then I can't find a good job, or I couldn't get an education, what does that do? Does that feed paranoia? Does that feed schizophrenia? Does that feed it, or does that alleviate it? We've got to educate kids. I'll close with this. When I went to elementary school in 1969 in El Monte, California, outside of Los Angeles, it was like a 3-hour day at kindergarten. You guys remember that? It was milk and cookies, nap time, learned your colors, and you rode your tricycle all over the place. Remember that? And I didn't speak English, so I hogged the tricycle, and when they tried to go, no entiendo, and it was great. It worked. The only non-English speaking kid in school. It was great. But now, my son Jake, who was turned 10 in April, his kindergarten started at 7:35 in the morning, think about this, and ended at 2:35 in the afternoon. His kindergarten had required him to be reading, writing, doing math. It wasn't about colors left and right. It was academics. And if you think about the haves, thank God that his mom and dad were able to put him in a robust, high-quality preschool environment. But think about the have-nots that don't have that environment. These kids aren't dumb. They're starting school behind. And every summer and every night, when the haves are having tutors and babysitters to help them with their homework, they're falling further behind, right? And then at the end of the day, guess where they end up? The mental illness, like I said, when you don't have opportunities, does that help or hurt? Does that hinder or help? It just exacerbates that problem. So I will just close with this. Anything that you all can do to speak out, to help these kids that come into their lives into families that don't have the opportunity to put them in that pre-K education, we can help them now, or we can pay for prison space later. I don't know about you, but the Bible I read tells me I'm supposed to take care of that stranger, right? Because I have a vested interest with that stranger. Do you want them to grow up to be successful, or do you want them to grow up a part of the 20,000 gang members that are running around the city of Houston? Because none of us live on an island. I don't care what neighborhood you live in. Sooner or later, crime's going to visit you. So I say we have a vested interest in those young people. So again, thanks for your progressive mindset. Thank you for absolutely kicking the butt of the stereotype that being conservative doesn't make you compassionate. We can be a conservative state, a compassionate state, because if nothing else, ultimately, when we do these things and we're smart on crime, what's going to happen to our costs? They're going to go down. It's cheaper to invest in the front end and be smart on it than it is to focus on slogans and so on. So again, thank you very much for the opportunity. If you come out tonight, have fun. Thank you all. Thank you.